Instructor Vaxil of the Galactic Peacekeeping Academy had seen many things in his 40 cycles of service. He'd trained warriors from 17 different species, overseen diplomatic missions to hostile territories, and once survived a hull breach that killed half his crew. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared him for the moment when Cadet Tommy Rodriguez stepped off the transport shuttle onto designation. Theta 7 looked around at the nightmare landscape of venomous flora and apex predators and said, "Oh man, this is just like the Boundary Waters." The Verex instructor's 4 eyes blinked in asynchronous confusion. His translator implant must have malfunctioned. "Clarification required," Vaxil clicked, his mandibles twitching. "You recognize this planetary classification?" "Sure." Tommy adjusted his standard-issue survival pack with the casual ease of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. "Class 9. Deathworld, right? My home planet's a 10. We used to do wilderness, training in places like this every summer growing up." The other cadets, a promising Deltharian who'd already begun hyperventilating through his gill slits, 2 Kriik sisters huddling together with their crystalline skin already showing stress fractures, and a young Horthian who looked ready to molt from pure anxiety, stared at the human with expressions ranging from disbelief to horror. Vaxil consulted his datapad, certain there must be an error. "Your species evolved on a Class 10 Deathworld?" "Earth, yeah." Tommy was already scanning the tree line, his posture relaxed but alert in a way that made Vaxil's combat instincts tingle. "Honestly, this place looks pretty tame. I don't even see any large predators yet, and the gravity's only about 1.2 standard. Back home, we've got everything from venomous insects the size of your claw to apex predators that can smell fear from 3 kilometers away." A sound emerged from the purple-black jungle surrounding the clearing. Something between a roar and a screech that made every non-human present freeze in evolutionary terror. It was the sound of something large, hungry, and very, very close. Tommy cocked his head. "Huh. 6-legged based on the gait pattern, probably around 400 kilos. Ambush predator. We should move away from the tree line." "How?" Cadet Talara, one of the Kriik sisters, managed to whisper through her vocalization crystals. "How are you not terrified?" The human looked genuinely confused by the question. "Of that? My little sister could handle that thing. Wait until you see what comes out after dark. That's usually when it gets interesting." Vaxil felt something he hadn't experienced since his first combat deployment, the cold certainty that he was completely out of his depth. The Academy's survival training program had been designed to push cadets to their absolute limits on a relatively controlled death world. The mortality rate was supposed to be 0. After all, they had perimeter defenses, emergency extraction protocols, and armed instructors. But looking at Tommy Rodriguez, who was now casually identifying edible plants while the rest of the class fought off panic attacks, Vaxil realized something profound. They hadn't dropped cadets on a death world to challenge them. They'd dropped a Deathworlder among cadets who'd never known real fear. And the 72-hour survival exercise had only just begun. Hour 6, camp establishment phase. By all projections, the cadets should have been huddled in their designated safe zone, following the careful, step-by-step survival protocols drilled into them over months of classroom training. Instead, Instructor Vaxil found himself watching Tommy Rodriguez give an impromptu lecture on advanced wilderness integration techniques, while the other cadets took notes with the fervor of religious converts. "See, the thing about death worlds," Tommy explained, crouching near a bubbling stream that Vaxil's scanner had flagged as containing 17 different toxins, "is that everything wants to kill you, sure, but everything also wants to stay alive. That's leverage." He dipped his canteen into the water while Cadet Irin, the Deltharian who'd been hyperventilating earlier, made a sound of pure anguish. "Cadet Rodriguez," Vaxil clicked sharply, "the water supply contains Sulfuric compounds, neurotoxins, heavy metals, and what I'm guessing is some kind of biological agent that attacks non-native nervous systems. Yeah. Tommy pulled out a small tube from his pack. That's why you use a filter straw. Earth invention. We've got water way worse than this in some places. Ever heard of the Rio Tinto? Makes this look like a juice box. He took a long drink while every alien present held their breath. Tommy smacked his lips. Tastes like pennies. Not bad. Talara's crystalline surface was now showing definite fracture patterns from stress. This is madness. The protocols state we must wait for the condensation collectors to produce sterile water, which will take 8 hours and give you maybe half a liter, Tommy interrupted gently. Meanwhile, you'll be dehydrated and making bad decisions. Look, I get that your protocols are designed for species that evolved on nice worlds. Class 2 habitable zones, Vaxil corrected automatically. Sure. But out here, following those protocols too rigidly will get you killed. Tommy stood, gesturing at the surrounding jungle. You've got to think like the environment. Adapt, improvise. Humans have been doing it for about 300,000 years. Your species is 300,000 cycles old. The Horthian cadet, Kresh, seemed awed by this. Oh no, Homo sapiens is about that old. The ancestor species go back way further. We've got a basically unbroken line of survival evolution going back about 4 billion years. All of it on a Class 10 Deathworld where everything from the bacteria to the weather is actively trying to murder you. The silence that followed this statement was profound. Vaxil checked his datapad again. Human evolution. Confirmed. Native environment. Classification. Confirmed. Average human survival capabilities. The data seemed to glitch here, showing numbers that couldn't possibly be right. How many of your species survived to reproductive age? He asked, certain this must be where the terrible truth revealed itself. Most of them? I mean, on Earth these days we've got medical technology and stuff, but even before that, we had like a 50 to 60% childhood survival rate, which is pretty good considering everything wanted to eat us. Tommy said this as if it were perfectly normal. Why? Because for the Vrex, a species that evolved on a Class 3 world, childhood survival rates had been 97% even before they discovered fire. For the Deltharians, it was 99.2%. The idea of half of all children dying before they could reproduce was the stuff of extinction-level catastrophes. Your species, Vaxil said slowly, evolved to accept 40% juvenile mortality as normal. I mean, when you put it that way, it sounds bad. Tommy started. A shriek cut through the jungle. Something had found Cadet Irin's carefully constructed shelter, a by-the-book elevated platform meant to keep him safe from ground-based predators. What none of the protocols had accounted for was that Theta 7's apex predators could climb. Tommy was moving before Vaxil could even process the sound, sprinting toward the shelter with a speed that shouldn't have been possible in 1.2 gravity. The human grabbed a fallen branch as he ran. Not a weapon, Vaxil noted with his tactical eye, but the right size to be a lever or pry bar. The creature currently shredding through Irin's shelter was a Theta stalker, 400 kilos of muscle, claws, and predatory instinct. It could tear through reinforced metal. It was completely silent when it hunted, and it was currently between Irin and any possible escape route. Tommy didn't slow down. He didn't call for backup. He didn't do any of the things the protocols demanded. He did what humans apparently always did. He made himself the bigger threat. "Hey!" Tommy's voice boomed across the clearing with a volume that made several cadets clap their hands over their auditory organs. "Over here!" The Theta stalker turned, its 6 eyes fixing on this new, smaller prey. Tommy spread his arms wide, making himself look larger. He bared his teeth, an aggressive display that Vaxil recognized from his xenopsychology courses as uniquely mammalian. And then the human did something that would haunt Vaxil's dreams for cycles to come. He charged directly at the predator while screaming at the top of his lungs. The Theta stalker evolved on a world where prey ran away and only the truly dangerous predators stood their ground, made a calculation. This small creature was either incredibly dangerous or completely insane. Either way, easier prey existed elsewhere. It retreated into the jungle. Tommy helped Irin down from what remained of his shelter, checked him for injuries, and then, as if the last 60 seconds hadn't just violated every assumption about prey behavior in the known galaxy, returned to his lecture. Anyway, as I was saying about water purification, hour 18. First nightfall. The Academy's carefully scheduled timeline had anticipated that cadets would huddle in their shelters after dark, waiting out the 12-hour night cycle while perimeter defenses kept them safe. The timeline had not anticipated Tommy Rodriguez teaching alien cadets how to build controlled fires. Fire is life on a Deathworld, Tommy explained, nursing a small blaze with the careful attention of a parent tending a child. Light, heat, cooking, water purification, and, most important, predator deterrent. Most animals don't like fire. It's unpredictable, it hurts, and it triggers evolutionary warnings. But the protocols forbid open flames, Talara protested weakly. Her earlier stress fractures had actually begun to heal once she'd accepted that survival might require bending some rules. They attract attention. They do, Tommy agreed. The right kind of attention. Fire says, something intelligent is here. Something that controls a force of nature. Most predators will go find easier prey. From his observation post 50 meters away, Instructor Vaxil had to admit the human was right. His thermal scanners showed at least 30 different heat signatures in the surrounding jungle, everything from small scavengers to apex predators. Before Tommy's fire, they'd been circling closer. Now they maintained a careful distance, except for one. Contact, Vaxil said into his communicator, addressing the other instructors scattered around the perimeter. Theta Prime approaching from Vector 7, distance 200 meters and closing. Theta Prime was the largest predator on this part of the planet, 800 kilos, 8 limbs, with natural armor plating that could withstand small arms fire. It was also supposed to be strictly nocturnal and incredibly territorial. The Academy had chosen this location specifically because Theta Prime's territory was 5 kilometers away. Either their intelligence had been wrong, or something had driven it from its hunting grounds. Should we extract the cadets? Instructor Kittel asked over the comm. The Horthian weapons specialist sounded worried. Vaxil watched Tommy, who had gone very still in that uniquely human way that suggested he'd detected something. Negative. Maintain position. I want to see how the human handles this. Vaxil, that's a juvenile's life you're gambling with. He's not a juvenile. Vaxil adjusted his scanner, pulling up Tommy's file again. Age, 19 standard years. For humans, that was barely into adulthood. But the file also noted Eagle Scout rank, Wilderness Emergency Medical Technician certified. Completed solo survival challenges in 3 different biomes on Earth. Volunteer search and rescue operator. The human had more practical survival experience than Vaxil had accumulated in 40 cycles. Everyone stay calm, Tommy said quietly. The other cadets, who'd been chatting nervously, immediately fell silent. Something in the human's tone demanded obedience. Don't run. Don't make sudden movements. Irin, you're closest to the fire. Add those 3 branches to the left, nice and slow. I don't understand, the Deltharian whispered. I don't see anything. 8-limbed, heavily armored, probably weighs about twice what my dad's truck did. It's circling from the east, staying just outside the firelight. Tommy's eyes tracked something the others couldn't see. It's curious, not hunting. Probably got displaced from its territory by something bigger or by volcanic activity. Either way, it's stressed and in an unfamiliar area. How can you possibly know all that? Kresh asked. Broken branches at 3 meters high, claw marks on the tree bark that are fresh. See how the sap's still running? And the way every other animal went dead silent about 30 seconds ago. Tommy slowly reached into his pack. Plus, I can hear it breathing. Vaxil cranked up his audio receptors. There, yes, a deep, rhythmic sound that spoke of enormous lung capacity. How had the human's inferior auditory system detected it first? Tommy pulled out a small device that Vaxil recognized as a standard-issue emergency flare, except the human had modified it somehow, attaching it to a straight branch. "When I tell you," Tommy said, his voice barely above a whisper, "I need everyone to stand up, spread out, and make yourselves big. Don't scatter, stay in a group." Apex predators on Deathworlds typically avoid confronting large groups because the risk of injury goes up exponentially. "And what will you be doing?" Talara asked. "Making sure it knows we're not prey." The Theta Prime emerged from the jungle like a walking nightmare. In the firelight, its armored carapace gleamed like oil, and its multiple eyes reflected the flames with an intelligence that was somehow worse than pure animal hunger. "Now," Tommy said calmly. The cadets stood as instructed, forming a tight group. Talara and her sister locked their crystalline arms together, creating a larger silhouette. Irin spread his gill slits wide in what might have been a threat display on his homeworld. Even Kresh raised his flexible anterior limbs to add to their apparent size. Tommy took 3 steps forward, separated from the group. "Cadet Rodriguez, maintain formation." Vaxil snapped into his communicator, but the human either didn't hear or didn't care. Tommy triggered the modified flare. Instead of shooting into the sky, it erupted in a controlled burst of white-hot sparks, attached to the branch like a primitive torch. The human began spinning it, creating a wheel of fire in the darkness while walking deliberately toward the Theta Prime. And then he roared. It wasn't a human sound. It was something deeper, more primal, a sound that came from a species that had spent millions of years competing with animals that were bigger, faster, and stronger. It was the sound of a creature that survived anyway through sheer audacity and the willingness to fight anything. The Theta Prime took a step back. Tommy spun the improvised torch faster, creating an even more impressive display, and roared again. He didn't attack. That would have triggered the predator's defensive instincts. He simply stood his ground, making it absolutely clear that this territory was claimed by something too dangerous to challenge. The Theta Prime made a sound that might have been a warning or might have been a question. Then it turned and melted back into the jungle. Tommy waited 30 seconds before stopping the torch spin. Another 30 before turning his back on the tree line. When he returned to the group, he was breathing hard but smiling. "See," he said. "Leverage. Everything wants to stay alive. Even apex predators do cost-benefit analysis." Cadet Irin promptly collapsed from stress-induced shock. In his observation post, Instructor Vaxil made a note in his report. Human cadet displays threat level classifications typically reserved for trained special forces. Operatives. Recommend immediate psychological evaluation. Then he crossed it out and wrote instead, "This is apparently normal for humans. Recommend updating training protocols. We are not adequately preparing cadets for species like this." Hour 34. Mid-exercise evaluation. The Academy had built its reputation on producing the galaxy's finest peacekeepers. Diplomats who could also fight. Warriors who could also think. Leaders who understood the complex tapestry of interstellar civilization. But as Instructor Vaxil watched Tommy Rodriguez teach his fellow cadets how to construct a water filtration system using nothing but sand, charcoal, and cloth, he wondered if perhaps the Academy had been teaching the wrong lessons. Most species tech, Tommy was explaining, carefully layering materials in a hollowed-out section of wood, is designed for worlds where water is basically safe. Earth, not so much. We've got flesh-eating bacteria, toxic algae blooms, industrial runoff, and animals that poop in literally every water source. So humans learned to filter water about 4,000 years ago. But without proper chemical analysis, Kresh protested. How do you know if the water is safe? Tommy shrugged. You don't, not 100%. But you make it safer, and then your immune system does the rest. Human immune systems are basically in a constant war with everything, so we developed pretty robust defenses. Vaxil checked this claim. Human immune system, designation overactive by galactic standards. Capable of fighting off infections that would kill most species. Also prone to attacking the host body in cases of autoimmune disorders. Another evolutionary trade-off that humans simply accepted. Your species is so fragile, Talara said softly, yet so resilient. How is that possible? Fragile? Tommy looked genuinely surprised. I mean, sure, we bruise easily and we can't regrow limbs or anything cool like that. But humans are pretty hard to actually kill. We've got redundant systems, distributed processing, high pain tolerance, and scary good endurance. Did you know humans are some of the best endurance hunters in Earth's ecosystem? We literally used to chase prey until it died of exhaustion. That sounds horrific, Irin said. Persistence hunting, we call it. We're not the fastest or the strongest, but we can keep going long after everything else gives up. Tommy finished the water filter and poured the collected stream water through it. The output was visibly clearer. That's kind of humanity's thing, actually. We don't quit. From the other side of the camp, Instructor Cattell approached Vaxil's position. The Horthian looked troubled. We need to talk about the human, Cattell said without preamble. I'm aware he's exceeded. Vaxil, he's revolutionizing their entire approach to survival. The other cadets have stopped following the protocols entirely. They're listening to him instead of us. Vaxil watched Tommy help Irin start his own fire, patiently explaining the technique while the Deltharians' gill slits fluttered with concentration. And they're all still alive. No injuries beyond minor scrapes. No panic attacks since hour 12. I'd say his methods are working. That's not the point. Cattell's carapace darkened with frustration. The protocols exist for a reason. They're tested, safe, designed for multi-species application. They're designed for species that evolved on kind worlds, Vaxil interrupted. Tommy was right about that. We've been teaching survival as if the universe is fundamentally safe and just needs to be approached correctly. But Deathworlders don't have that luxury. They learn that the universe is hostile and you survive by being clever, adaptable, and stubborn. Cattell was quiet for a moment. Do you know what the Horthian word for human translates to? The ones who survived what they should not have. It's not a compliment. It's a warning. Maybe we've been thinking about it wrong, Vaxil said. Maybe it's not a warning. Maybe it's a lesson. That night, as the second darkness fell over Theta 7, something changed in the cadet group. They'd started building their shelters separately, each species falling back on their own protocols. Now they worked together, combining Tommy's Deathworld adaptations with the technical knowledge the others brought from more advanced civilizations. Talara's crystalline structure could detect seismic vibrations, giving early warning of approaching predators. Irin's gill slits could process air composition, warning of toxic gases or fires. Kresh's flexible manipulators could work in ways human fingers couldn't, creating more intricate tools. And Tommy taught them all how to think like survivors instead of victims. The thing about a death world, he said as they sat around the fire, is that it teaches you the universe doesn't care about you, not in a mean way. It's just neutral. So you can either curl up and give up, or you can say, okay, universe, let's dance. Humans choose to dance, Talara said. It wasn't a question. Every single day. Tommy grinned. We're just too stubborn to know when we're beaten. In the observation post, Vaxil made another note. The human doesn't just survive. He teaches others to survive. Query. Is this why they became the galaxy's newest spacefaring species so quickly after achieving FTL? Not technological superiority, but because they make everyone around them better at survival. He sent the note to the Academy Commandant with a priority flag. 3 hours later, he received a response. Observation noted. Human integration into peacekeeping forces accelerated. We need that quality. Hour 58. Final challenge phase. The Academy's survival exercise had one last test, a simulated emergency requiring cadets to cross 15 kilometers of hostile terrain to reach an extraction point. It was meant to test everything they'd learned under pressure and time constraints. What the Academy hadn't planned for was the territorial dispute. 2 Theta Primes, likely the one from the previous night and a rival, had begun fighting in the valley that separated the cadets from their extraction point. The ground shook with each impact of their armored bodies. Trees splintered, and right through the middle of their battleground ran the only viable route to the objective. "We can request early extraction," Instructor Vaxil offered over the comm link. No shame in recognizing an impossible situation. Tommy looked at the other cadets, who'd all gathered to assess the problem. "What do you all think?" "The protocols say to avoid megafauna conflicts at all costs," Irin said. But he didn't sound as confident in the protocols as he had 3 days ago. "The seismic patterns suggest they'll fight for at least another hour," Talara added. Her crystalline structure had become invaluable for sensing environmental changes. "But the route around adds 4 hours to our journey. We'd miss the extraction window." "I can climb," Kresh offered. "Perhaps scout an alternate route through the canyon." Tommy nodded slowly. "Okay, so here's what I'm thinking. We don't go around, and we definitely don't go through. We wait for the right moment, and we move fast through the gaps in the fighting." "That's insane," Irin said. "Yep." Tommy grinned. "But you know what's more insane? 3 days ago, you all thought you couldn't survive out here at all. Now look at you. You've made fire, filtered water, built shelters, and faced down predators. You've already done a dozen impossible things." "That was with your guidance," Talara pointed out. "Sure, at first. But last night when that pack of scavengers tried to raid our camp, who spotted them first?" "I did," Talara said softly. "And who figured out how to modify the shelter design to handle the storm?" "Kresh," Irin admitted. "And who talked down that nervous herbivore that wandered into camp?" "I did," Irin said, sounding surprised at himself. "Right. So here's what we know. You're all smarter, tougher, and more capable than you thought you were 3 days ago. That's not because I'm some magic human. It's because Deathworlds teach you what you're really made of." Tommy stood, adjusting his pack. "The question is, do you trust yourselves?" The silence that followed was profound. "I trust us," Kresh said finally. "As do I," Talara added, her sister echoing the sentiment. Irin's gill slits fluttered. "This is against every instinct my species evolved. But, yes, I trust us." Tommy nodded. "Then let's show these oversized lizards what happens when you underestimate the power of teamwork and strategic thinking." The next 40 minutes were the longest of Instructor Vaxil's life. He watched through his scopes as Tommy positioned the team on the ridge overlooking the valley, timing the gaps in the Theta Prime's combat. He watched them move together, using hand signals and staying low. He watched them freeze when one of the Theta Primes stumbled in their direction, and he nearly called for emergency extraction right then. But Talara had sensed the vibrations before the beast even moved, giving the team precious seconds to take cover. And when a falling tree nearly crushed Kresh, Irin's superior reaction time pulled him clear. And when they reached an impassable cliff face, Tommy boosted the others up before being pulled up himself by Kresh's flexible limbs. They worked like a unit. No, like a pack. Like they'd been training together for cycles instead of days. 72 minutes after starting their crossing, all 5 cadets emerged on the far side of the valley and sprinted the final kilometer to the extraction point. When the shuttle arrived, Instructor Vaxil was waiting with the other instructors. Standard protocol called for a formal assessment, reviewing each cadet's performance against the established metrics. Instead, Vaxil found himself doing something he'd never done in 40 cycles of service. He saluted first. "Cadets," he said formally, "you have not just passed the survival exercise. You have redefined what survival means for the Academy." Tommy, covered in mud and sporting several new scratches, just smiled. "Does this mean we're getting an extra day off?" Despite himself, Vaxil's mandibles clicked in what might have been laughter. "Denied. But it does mean you're all being fast-tracked for advanced wilderness training." "All of us?" Irin asked, shocked. "All of you," Vaxil confirmed, "because you learned something out here that can't be taught in a classroom, how to be more than your limitations." As the cadets boarded the shuttle, exhausted and triumphant, Instructor Cattell approached Vaxil. "So," the Horthian said quietly, "what have we learned about humans?" Vaxil watched Tommy through the shuttle window, already animatedly telling some story to his fellow cadets, making them laugh despite their exhaustion. "We learned," Vaxil said slowly, "that humans don't just survive Deathworlds. They make everyone around them capable of surviving too. They share their madness, their stubborn refusal to quit, their absolute certainty that the next impossible thing is just another challenge to overcome. Is that a useful quality for peacekeepers?" Vaxil thought about the galaxy they served, full of conflicts, disasters, impossible situations that required someone to step up anyway. "Cattell, I think that might be exactly what we need." 2 weeks later, Academy Commandant's office. Commandant Threlix reviewed the incident reports from the Theta 7 exercise with growing fascination. The human cadet's performance was remarkable, certainly. But what interested her more was the transformation of the other cadets. Cadet Irin had requested transfer to disaster response training, a specialty requiring deployment to hazardous environments. Previously, he'd been on track for administrative services. The Kriik sisters had applied for the Exploration Corps, specifically requesting assignments to uncharted territories. Previously, they'd been considering careers in station management. Cadet Kresh had submitted a proposal for updating the Academy's survival protocols, incorporating adaptive methodology and human-style flexible response frameworks. Every single cadet from that exercise had been changed by their exposure to the human way of thinking. Instructor Vaxil stood before her desk, waiting for assessment of his controversial decision to let the human essentially take over the training. "Tell me, Vaxil," the Commandant said finally, "what do you think humanity's greatest contribution to galactic civilization will be?" The Vrex instructor considered the question carefully. "Technology seems unlikely. They're catching up but not ahead. Military might, they're too small a population. Economic power, too new to the scene." "Then what?" "I think," Vaxil said slowly, "they're going to teach us all how to be braver than we thought possible. Not through formal instruction, but just by being themselves. By facing each challenge with this attitude that failure isn't even a consideration, that any problem can be solved with enough creativity and stubbornness." Commandant Threlix pulled up an image on her display. Earth, that blue and white marble that somehow produced a spacefaring species despite being actively hostile to complex life. "I've been reading about human history," she said. "Do you know what they did when they encountered obstacles? When faced with water they couldn't cross, they built boats. When faced with air, they couldn't breathe. They invented diving equipment. When faced with space that would kill them instantly, they built ships and suits and just went anyway." "Suicidal determination," Vaxil suggested. "Or perhaps," the Commandant said, the answer to a question every Deathworlder must answer. Does the universe get to decide what's possible for you, or do you decide for yourself? She closed the report and looked at Vaxil directly. I'm authorizing a new training track, Hostile Environment Specialist, we'll call it formally. Unofficially, I want you to create what Cadet Rodriguez would call Deathworld School. Train cadets the way humans train their young, by exposing them to controlled adversity and teaching them they're stronger than they know. That could be dangerous. Yes, it could also save lives when our peacekeepers deploy to crisis zones and disaster areas. The galaxy is not a safe place, Vaxil. Perhaps it's time we stopped pretending our personnel can be kept safe and instead taught them how to handle danger. After the instructor left, Commandant Threlix pulled up Cadet Rodriguez's personal file again. His application essay caught her eye, specifically the question about why he wanted to join the Peacekeeping Academy. His answer, because someone has to help. Might as well be me. So simple, so human, so absolutely confident that an individual could make a difference against impossible odds. She approved the fast-track promotion recommendation, moving Tommy Rodriguez from cadet to provisional instructor status, pending his graduation. The galaxy needed people who believed that impossible just meant nobody's done it yet. Outside the academy, the stars turned in their ancient dance, indifferent, distant, and utterly unconcerned with the struggles of the small creatures living in the thin shells of atmosphere, clinging to scattered rocks. But those small creatures, especially one stubborn species from a blue-white marble called Earth, had long ago decided that the universe's indifference was not permission to quit. It was just one more obstacle to overcome. And humans were very, very good at overcoming obstacles. Want more stories about humanity's unique approach to the galaxy? The universe is full of species that evolved on gentle worlds, who built civilizations on the assumption that nature is fundamentally cooperative. Then there are Deathworlders, survivors, adapters, the ones who looked at a hostile universe and said, "Challenge accepted." Follow for more tales of human ingenuity, alien perspectives, in the moment when the galaxy realizes that Earth didn't just produce survivors, it produced teachers, showing everyone else how to be brave. What's your summer camp horror story? What did you survive that others found terrifying? Share your stories in the comments, because every human has a Deathworld tale, even if we don't always realize it.